You're with Patrick Henningsen on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back, folks. Welcome back. We're in hour number 2, this live broadcast. Thank you very much for rejoining us here at TNT, Today's News Talk. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We are streaming out live on multiple audio streams. Of course, you want to go to the mothership, that's tntradio.live, and you want to join the TNT chat community there. It's the red bubble in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. That's where you want to be during the program, because that's where all the action is in terms of chatter, debate, opposition research. There's memes in there. There's just a lot of good banter, quality banter in the TNT chat community. We have a good community for this program during our live broadcast. You can also watch us on the live streams on YouTube and also other fine video sharing platforms as well. You'll see all the links at TNT's main website, tntradio.live. Go there and get linked up. Now, again, to Ian Fail, investigative journalist in the first hour, talking about in the scenes, interference, meddling by domestic or foreign. We'll talk more about that in the coming months, for sure. Welcome on to the program right now, however, investigative journalist and radio host Trish Wood joining us on the live link right now. Trish, thank you very much for coming on the program this week.
Nice to see you, Patrick. I'm glad I get to do this once in a while, because I feel like I'm with a bit of a fellow traveler existing in this world where there's this terrible thing going on and nobody's really thinking about it the same way many of the smarter journalists are. So this is refreshing for me.
So in terms of the big thing going on, let's talk about the main issue right now, what's happening in the Middle East. Trish, just give us your sort of your impressions, your thoughts from the last time we spoke. Obviously, things have developed a little bit there, but it's also stagnated as well. There's not a lot of movement, although we're very encouraged by South Africa's effort in the International Courts of Justice. Where are you at with this right now?
Well, it changes minute by minute, right? It's kind of like a bad love affair where you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. Like, I wake up some mornings and I think, well, that this can't possibly go on any longer because a certain thing happened. But by mid-afternoon, I'll witness that guy in the State Department briefing room responding to, well, for instance, the charge of this poor Palestinian guy who was waving a white flag and was shot in front of an ITV freelance cameraman. And him saying, well, Israel's our partner and we don't know about that and I haven't seen it. And it's like cognitive dissonance, because the kind of outrage that should be being expressed, that I believe mirrors the feelings of most good people. Nobody could be unmoved by that unless there's something seriously wrong with them. So I see those things and I think, how are they getting away from that? But I will say that briefing in particular did one thing that gave me hope. The media did what they used to do in the olden days when I was in the media doing these scrummy type of interviews over someone who was supposed to be accountable. The first reporter asked the question and he dodged it with, long answers that meant nothing. And then the second reporter picked it up, and then the third reporter picked it up, and the fourth reporter picked it up. And that's really a good sign, because it means that the reporters who are working that particular beat in DC are starting to get a little bit antsy about the fact that nobody's answering questions about what are clearly war crimes. And that was the question, right? If what you see on the tape is real, there is some pushback on that now. I noticed on Twitter a couple of minutes ago, they're saying it was a Pallywood production or something. But if that video is real, and there's no reason right now, I think, to think it wasn't, it's a war crime, plain and simple. You can't really argue that point. And the way that these spokesmen for the Biden administration deal with these things in a kind of a robotic, talking pointsy, inhumane way, it's hard to watch. And I actually think it's not good for the country.
Yeah, it's so funny as well how the U.S. government has been inundated with evidence on the war crimes front. I mean, it's literally that file is just growing every day. What they submitted to The Hague, which everybody can see, South Africa did a good presentation on it, but that was only up to December. That was only basically, that was a file that ended on December 10th or December 14th. And already, Trish, add another month to that, another 2 months to that. I mean, I never think there's never in history been so much evidence of war crime and of genocide, if we want to be more accurate, than anything else in history. So I honestly think, Trish, that this is causing a paralysis in the system. This could even really gum up the wheels of justice because it's just so over the top and overwhelming. Normally what happens, Trish, in these situations in history is one force would come and obliterate another force who is doing this. That doesn't look like that's going to happen. Israel's not going to get obliterated. So they're able to carry on with this. So we're in a kind of very funny situation in human history, Trish, that I don't think a lot of people are prepared for, do not know what to do, do not know how to react. And we're being forced to cope with something that's just, I don't think it's a natural thing to have to process. Trauma.
Yeah, it's absolutely a trauma. And I do want to say, based on what you were just alluding to, it's the idea that what is going on here, really, to put it in a very crude way, Israel is shooting fish in a barrel. That's what they're doing. These people can't leave. They don't, aside from the kind of street fighting that they're doing with the rebels or whatever we're calling them, the civilians are basically trapped. They can't leave. And they're being killed indiscriminately in a place in which they're kind of encapsulated. So that's the other part of this that's really kind of awful. And I did want to say one thing, because I keep shouting out the journalists there. I admire them so very deeply, and I'm really angry that the journalists in the West seem to not care one whit about these people who are actually doing brave things under the most extremely different. They're not staying at night in fancy hotels like we did when we were in the field and going to the bar at night and then having a steak. They're starving along with everybody else. They're being bombed. And I noticed that Motaz, who is a big hero of this, the young, I think he was posting mostly on Instagram, but some on Twitter too. He left for undisclosed reasons, but I would not be surprised. He is in, I believe it's Qatar, for mental health reasons. I think you can't survive this mentally. And Wael Dahdouh, the guy who also should be the journalist of the year for survival, his wife and kids were killed, and he was on air when it was announced, and then he was shot and his cameraman died because they couldn't get in to rescue him. The Israeli forces were blocking the road. And then his son, who is also a journalist, was killed. And he's still standing, unbelievably still standing. And he apparently is kind of off now, getting some kind of medical treatment. But I just need to shout those guys out because the rest of the Western media is not doing it. And I think it's really important to say that.
No, Motaz has been unbelievable, and he's like the people, Palestinian people. He's a treasure for them. So highly regarded. When it was looked like his account might have been shut down, or something would have happened with his account, whatever is hacked or suppressed, whatever, they're all up in arms. He was literally one of the key voices getting their story out, getting those images out. So I think he was being targeted by the Israeli forces. They were tracking him. He was definitely on their hit list. So, I mean, this is another thing, the targeting of journalists. This is like so beyond the pale, isn't it, for Western values, right? Our democratic values in the West. And here you got plenty of evidence that is the case. Not just the journalists, Trish, the families of the journalists as well in Gaza. Unbelievable. And I've not heard anything. If it comes up in those State Department briefings, it's not coming up in the White House briefings, by the way. Hardly any of this is. It's only like you said, those dissident journalists in the State Department briefings, the Sam Husseinis of the world, the Max Blumenthal's of the world. These are maybe Matt Lee, I think, has woken up on this issue recently. But nothing in the White House, nothing on Israel.
Nothing. And I don't know, this is maybe the nadir of legacy media as we're watching this too. This war, if that's what we're even calling it, may also end the credibility of these people, because someday somebody's going to wake up and say, maybe tomorrow, right? This was a genocide, maybe tomorrow. And we'll be back asking all the same questions we did after the Holocaust, which is, where was the New York Times? Where were all the people? Why weren't we helping more than we did earlier, sooner, right? And so I hope we're not doing this again, which kind of reminds me to say something controversial, but I can't let it go, which was Elon at Auschwitz, right? He's got to settle some issues with his advertisers. He was being picked on unmercilessly by Media Matters, who are completely dishonest about being anti-Semitic. I don't think he's anti-Semitic, but I think that for him to go and make that appearance at Auschwitz with Ben Shapiro, who is a cheerleader to what is going on in Gaza, rabid, and not just rabid, but lying. I mean, we're now, I'm going to talk about this in a minute. Israeli media is now saying October 7th atrocity stories are not exactly what, which you and I and Max have been saying since I published first on that October 13th. So, and got a lot of pushback. And you did too. I saw your tweet when you were talking about the beheaded babies, right? And Max was on it. And so we all have been talking about that with a reason. And the reason being that, and I think this is going to come out too, and I might try to find sort of an historical anthropologist on this to talk about it. I think that Netanyahu and his Israeli cabinet, some of whom are Kahanist nightmares, used the atrocity propaganda fake stories to create a mass hysteria event within the country, because people in Israel also are not behaving in a normal way. And I know they're afraid, but we saw a lot of irrationality during COVID times and the pushing of fear porn and fear propaganda. And Netanyahu is a lot of things, but I don't think he's stupid. And I don't think he is above terrifying beyond what was already a terrifying and horrible event, more with these pieces of stories mostly about children. Like only one baby was killed. I mean, that's too many, but only one. We know her name. We know what happened. So that's in the record. So they're still talking about the 40 beheaded babies. They're still talking about the baby in the oven. They're still talking about the woman having her baby. I mean, all that stuff. And there's a reason for it. It's because that is the ultimate taboo. Only cutting off heads is a huge taboo, obviously. And hurting children, torturing children is a huge taboo. So they use that in order to gin up as much hatred and fear to dehumanize the Palestinians as they possibly could. And I believe Netanyahu had a plan. I can't prove this, but I hope that one day when cooler heads prevail in their actual investigations, we will learn that October 7th was not at all how it was portrayed to us, that the friendly fire was probably bigger than we know, that the Hannibal Directive, which is, you can kill civilians if it means getting the bad guy, even indiscriminately, will have been in play, which they're now kind of talking about. So that story will not be as big. And I also think that there may be a point where a decision is taken where Netanyahu said, hey, let's make our move. We wanted to get rid of these guys. We want to get them out of Gaza. We want to get them out of here. This is our chance. Because I don't believe, I do think people can run with fake stories just because they're scared and things take hold of them. But a lot of these stories were perpetrated by military people. So it really makes you wonder if this wasn't the plan, that after October 7th, Netanyahu convened a meeting and said, okay, let's get them out. We're going to go for broke. We're going to rubbleize Gaza. But the only way we can do it is to convince people that the people who live in Gaza are monsters, the worst of the worst. And I think that's what's happened.
I think that's that's baked into all their institutions. It's into their military strategy. Just that they had more opportunities to amp that up. But that's actually part and parcel of their doctrine of information warfare. According to their doctrine, anything is permissible as long as it furthers the ends. Look, I'm talking with investigative journalist and radio host Trish Wood right now. We're talking about the situation in Gaza. Let's also talk about the country of Canada on the other side. Justin Trudeau, he's also weighing in on the Genocide Convention case with South Africa. We'll hit that and other breaking news regarding Canada on the other side. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. This is TNT, Today's News Talk. We'll be right back.
TNT's Pella Nuroff-Taylor.
We need to do a lot of deconstruction of these phrases and really think about what it means, because what does far right mean? I'd say that far right means anything that you don't like, and it's just a label, a bit like the Chinese under Mao, their state press used to call anyone who was an ideological opponent capitalist pig dogs, whatever. And it was just meant to evoke a response, and it was a signal from the rulers to the rule that this is what you should think, without actually having to think. It's meant to evoke a sort of Pavlovian reaction that these are bad guys, and a moderate in our lingo. I mean, let's see, foreign coverage. The BBC will say the moderate blah 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 party in the third world. Meaning, well, they're guys we approve of, and then the extremist is someone who we don't approve of.
Helen Neuroth-Taylor on today's News Talk, TNT.
Radio works because of its ability to personalize to the listener.
What's exciting these days is that people are rediscovering it. You know, people are really rediscovering just how powerful radio is, how ubiquitous it is. It's in our cars, it's in our homes. There are so many new ways to access it. It's everywhere.
To find out more, go to tntradio.live.
At the top of the hour, we'll keep on top of the news.
It's the most important thing we can do.
On today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
All right, folks. All right, welcome back. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. We're still in the second hour of this live broadcast. We're going to go back to our guest right now, investigative journalist and radio host Trish Wood, joining us on the line right now. Yeah, Trish, I agree with what you're saying there. It is unconscionable the amount of fake news and fabricated reporting that has been generated by Israel, their government, their media arms, their spokespeople. Elon Levy is like the British Israeli spokesperson there for Netanyahu. He put out some absolute howlers on social media and erase them, by the way, because of the backlash. But I mean, this is what you're dealing with here in terms of the level of deceit, the level of propaganda. It's unprecedented, and it has induced a state of hysteria in Israeli society, in the U.S., in the West as well. A lot of people bought into this juggernaut too, but it has been done before in the past. It's just this one is really, really special on many different levels. So in Canada, your country, your prime minister was asked directly about whether this was a genocide in Gaza. As this is the biggest story in the world in The Hague, South Africa's lodged this case, and a lot of people were shocked at the comments by Justin Trudeau, basically denying that there's any genocide there. He was visibly uncomfortable too when he was asked that question. What are your thoughts on Trudeau on this issue?
Well, let me just start by saying he's visibly uncomfortable when he's asked any hard question. I mean, he's a drama teacher, right? So he's in over his head on most policy questions. There's no issues about that. We're all kind of used to it. But the problem with that response for me is that he is much more far left in his worldview. I disagree with many, many things that he thinks and has done in the past. But I thought about this, well, at least he's a progressive lefty. So like a stopped clock who is right twice a day, he'll get Gaza right, because most of the people supporting Palestinians right now are left of center. The conservatives have all gone crazy and are screaming for more bombardments. So I thought, well, at least this is one thing in his whole time as prime minister that I can agree with him on. And he got it wrong. And I think the reason he did get it wrong is because we all feel very strongly, or those of us who are wide awake and observing the world scene, that he is being puppeteered, by the globalists. And he's quite proud of it. He's a guy who loves his motorcades. His very own brother, who's quite an interesting guy, told me that what the prime minister likes most about being prime minister, that might be hyperbole, but likes a lot about being prime minister, is the motorcades. And he's legendary for having these 20-car blacked out windows Suburbans with 98 million guys with, radios surrounding him. So he loves that high profile stuff. He loves Davos. He loves being part of that crew. And so we saw in Davos just recently where their sympathies lie, and their sympathies lie with Israel on this. So that's where I think it's coming from. And I also think he's not the only one. There are a lot of people supporting Israel right now, and I'm surprised by it. So he's not the only one. Bobby Kennedy Jr., I was like, what? Excuse me? I nearly fell out of my chair when what did he say? They're the most pampered people in the world. And he's a smart guy. So, this is like I think Whitney Webb goes too far with some of the stuff she says, but her basic premise that maybe everybody's being blackmailed kind of resonates for me a bit on this issue, because people, and even Elon, people are saying things in support of something that as human beings, I never, ever would have thought that they would support. And that includes our prime minister. So I don't actually literally think everybody's being blackmailed, but I don't know how else to say it. I think in his case, it's for sure, it's trying to please the Gulfstream jet crowd who fly into Davos.
And the Israeli lobby is very powerful in Canada. Very powerful.
Oh, yeah.
So he's going to get his earful from those organizations for sure.
Yeah, and then the other thing that's happening to him right now, which is quite fun, is that Tucker Carlson is here. He's in Alberta, and our media here is so, like, legacy media is just so out of it that a lot of people here watched Tucker, especially on Fox News, his monologues. I thought they were terrific. And he's a very, very profound critical thinker. And there were days when I would say to myself around 3-4 in the afternoon, I wonder what Tucker's going to talk about tonight. And I hope it's this, because I don't know what I think yet. And maybe he'll clarify it. I'm sad that he doesn't do as many of those as he used to. He does more interviews now, but I love those. And so Canadians were very addicted to Tucker and are. And so he's doing, he's sold out show in like a rock place, like a big stadium. It's incredible. And of course, he spends the whole time on the stage crapping on the prime minister. So that's fun for people out west. And then the other bad thing that's happened to him, but we were all screaming yay, and oddly happened, I was on the phone with Tamara Leach, who was one of the leaders of the trucker convoy. And she went, "Oh my God, you won't believe what just happened." And I said, "What?" And she got a message from somebody she knew on the law team saying that the Emergencies Act, which was when the prime minister sent in the horses and the cops in black bloc attire and froze the bank accounts and all these things that completely traumatized the country to end a legal protest, Justice Mosley found that the Emergencies Act was illegal. So they didn't have a grounds to introduce it that didn't violate the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That is our first big legal victory on any of this stuff in 3 years. All the COVID lawsuits, most of them, now I think a couple of them may have gone ahead, but they were completely overruled. They didn't want to hear some of them. When they did, they sided with the other people anyway. So this is a big moment. And I heard from a lot of my listeners that they felt for the first time that they could exhale as a Canadian again, because maybe their institutions were going to get it right. So that's not a small thing, losing this judgment. They said they were going to appeal. Chrystia Freeland came out and said, she looked pretty shell-shocked, actually. He pushed her out. He didn't even come out. She did. That they're going to appeal it. But I think this is kind of rock solid. And there are some calls that they need a leadership review. I think if he was an honorable person, which I don't believe he is, he would just step down. But this is a huge rebuke from an honorable justice. And let me just say, he probably lives in Ottawa, this justice, and the convoy is not very well liked there. So this ruling means that poor Justice Mosley is not going to get invited to very many good dinner parties in the near future. People are going to be mad at him for it. It went against the prevailing elite zeitgeist, is what I'm saying. So it was a big win, and we were all really happy about it.
Oh, there's a lot of Canadians that are backing that judgment, that's for sure, right across the country. So the people are with them, but the elite are not. It's a very familiar theme, sadly, Trish, that we're seeing more often on all these issues. Yeah. But,
well, that's what happened. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, well, that's what happened to the truckers, because I don't think they realized when they were going into Ottawa what they were going into. They were blue collar, kind of rational thinking, saying, we're calling BS. And I believe myself that frequently working people get stuff right that the PhDs get wrong. I see that now more than ever. I don't think they realized when they were heading to Ottawa that it's a city that actually is the antithesis of what they are, right? So it's bureaucrats who make a lot of money, who were paid to stay home during COVID, full salary, on their Pelotons, ordering Uber Eats, working from home, right? So they were all totally groovy, while everybody else was like, oh, this is terrible, right? So the truckers show up, and you immediately had a clash, a kind of a clash of civilizations. I call it a bit of a class struggle too, because the critiques by Ottawa citizens about the truckers are mostly silly. Oh, I smelt diesel fumes, or the honking was terrible, or something, on a major issue of public health, right? So there really was a case of two solitudes when these things met. And poor Justice Mosley lives in Ottawa, where they're hated, so he's not going to be a very popular guy.
Yeah, well, look, this is just indicative, I think, of so many different issues. We have a similar dynamic in America and Europe as well. Populism being suppressed, and technocracy being elevated, and they're defending their citadel, their cathedral. But this is a great judgment, very positive development there in Canada. Investigative journalist, radio host Trish Wood. Trish, give us a shout out where people can find your work before we go.
Right. So I'm on Substack. Trish Wood is Critical, and I have a podcast which is also called Trish Wood is Critical. The audio is on every platform, and the video right now we're carrying on my Substack page, and we're moving it to YouTube soon-ish, as soon as I can figure out how to work my camera properly. Not easy.
Well, we got you tagged also on our X Twitter platform there on our show post.
Yes.
Follow Trish there for her hot takes, for her updates, for her links as well. Thank you, Trish, for joining us. And also, we're going to take a break right now and catch up with our research assistant for the show on the other side. Two big stories: the farmers' protests in Europe and the UK conscription. Are they serious? We'll find out more from Christian James on the other side. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. We'll be right back after these messages.